The agenda this week heard the Leap Manifesto pitch, checked in on the sharing economy and Uber, considered Métis identity, and heard two remarkable personal stories from people who faced the unthinkable. The agenda's Week in Review begins with preparing Ontario towns and cities for disasters such as the fire that overtook Fort McMurray this week. Without further ado, this is what's in the news. Let's run these pictures. My goodness, look at these images coming out of Fort Mac, Alberta. Just absolutely frightening as people try to get to safety and get away from there. And I guess I want to know, as we look at these pictures, Mike O'Brien, let me start with you. Okay, disaster has befallen. Who's in charge?
Well, when you have an emergency, it's something that's beyond the capacity for the government to cope or the responders to cope at the time. And the whole role of emergency management is to get government back into a position where it can provide the day-to-day services so that they can respond and return to a sense of normalcy. So the whole idea is to get our government working again. That's where emergency management's role is, and to provide direction and information for the community.
But Barney, when they say, okay, this person is in charge and ordering the evacuations, is that the premier? Is that the head of the police service in that city? Is it the head of the firefight? I mean, who's in charge?
That's a very good question, Steve. And depending on the nature of the emergency, the scope and the scale of it, really depends on who the commander will be in these cases. As you probably are aware, in Ontario, there has been two declarations of emergencies back in 2002 with the blackout, and then certainly with SARS. The Premier has the powers to delegate others to make decisions around where the evacuations will occur, when they will occur, how they will occur, where people will go to, and the implications of that ensures that people are looked after safely. There are 444 municipalities in the province, all have to have emergency plans. They work very closely together with the province and our federal partners to ensure we've got the right sweater knit, if you like, to be sure that people are cared for when emergencies do occur.
Prime Minister's office sent out this tweet saying, "My thoughts are with people affected by the fire in Fort McMurray tonight. Stay safe and remember to follow evacuation orders." Okay, Sharon, when you're pressed into duty, whose orders are you awaiting?
Well, we wait for the municipality to provide that information. So it's really important for people to understand, in terms of preparedness for themselves, that they need to listen to radio, media, social media, if they're following municipalities and emergency officials, so that they can follow the rules that are laid out. So
I'll stop you right there.
Yep.
What if there's we talked about the blackout. What if there's a blackout? Your television doesn't work, your radio doesn't work. Who has transistor radios anymore? Almost nobody.
So one of the key things, I think, for any emergency management program is the preparedness piece. And we spend a lot of time at the Canadian Red Cross working with municipalities and officials like these to educate the public. And those are the things that they need to think about. You need a battery-operated radio or a wind-up radio. Don't rely on power. You know, we need to think old school a little bit when we do our emergency planning for ourselves. And if we can prepare ourselves individually, then the people that are responding, like Canadian Red Cross, but also emergency officials, can then focus on the most vulnerable people who cannot necessarily do that. So those are the things that we need to think about ahead of time, which is why, you know, things like Emergency Preparedness Week are so important, which is this week, so that we can actually have people educated.
It is horribly ironic that we are in the midst of National Emergency Preparedness Week, and here's what happens in Fort Mac. Based on your understanding, Mike, of how things are across the country, how prepared do you think they were in Fort Mac for this kind of a disaster?
I think this came very, very quickly, and they have had public outreach where they encourage the community to prepare, have emergency kits, have 72 hours worth of food and water ready to go. Not necessarily everybody follows this, and the government has, the local municipality and the province and the federal government all have plans prepared and practice them and have networks built, which is incredibly important, bringing people together and being able to communicate. So they would certainly be prepared for hazards and for the specific hazards in Fort McMurray, which obviously forest fires would be one of them.
How do you get people out? I mean, there's no subways, there's no streetcars up there. How are people getting out?
Well, it would seem that they're using their personal transport, plus there's a certain level of public transit there as well. In most places, if you have a social network, if you have some form of transport, if you have a kit of some sort, you're probably going to be okay. You're probably going to be able to make it out of a disaster. It's the people who require government assistance on a day-to-day basis are the ones that require help the most during an emergency.
They're the most vulnerable.
And you're talking like 5% of your population, so it's still a significant number. And one of the things that the municipality will be doing is supporting the Red Cross and social service agencies to help these people evacuate.
Okay, Barney, let me put this to you, because CBC spoke to a resident of Fort Mac who had this to say. The resident said, "We're on a divided highway and people are going over on the wrong side of the highway and driving against traffic to try to get down. It's just total chaos and pandemonium." This person said it took an hour to cover 2 kilometers. In the video with Alan Bonner that we saw just before our conversation here, he brought up this idea of contraflow on the highways, where obviously everything heads out as opposed to in 2 directions. Do you think Fort Mac would have implemented that contraflow?
I'm not sure. I don't believe that they probably would have, just by the nature of the highways that feed and support that community. There would probably be an intent to try and do that. Contraflow is generally the sort of thing you would do with large urban centers, or where you have 4 to 6 lanes on both sides of the highway that you turn around essentially to have residents move quickly and efficiently out of a particular area.
The taxi industry hasn't exactly been an exemplar of great service and even great working conditions for cab drivers generally. It's a broken system, so it needs shaking up. Uber has obviously shaken the system up. I would argue that what governments around the world, in Ontario, across Canada, should be doing is, what is in the public interest here? Do we want a safe taxi system? We want an accessible taxi system. We want competition where prices are reasonable. And let's design simple, basic rules that drive towards those 3 or 4 key objectives. And I think that's what we're starting to see in Toronto, in Ottawa, in some of these other cities, that we're starting to see that policy conversation start to take place.
Tom, you presumably want heavy regulation on Uber, or would you rather just ban it altogether?
No, I don't think it even maybe logically makes sense to say ban a company, right? It's all a matter about the practices under which they operate. And I think they have deliberately, Sunil's saying, pushing forward very quickly, trying to force governments to move quickly. I don't think there's necessarily a need to move that quickly. I think governments can afford to take their time. I think if you look in, if you look in Germany, if you look in Korea, if you look in Spain, some governments have said, we need time to sort this out. The other thing is, I think there's nothing inevitable about the future of Uber, right? Technology is going to change. We know that in 10 years' time, we're going to be using smartphones or whatever comes next for more parts of our lives. But Uber is, although a part of this story is a technology story, a lot of it is, as I say, a bet that they can change rules. It's a deregulation story as much as it's a technology story. And I think Sunil is right that the taxi industry is not one that has gained a lot of fans, that's for sure. But I think we need to remember why cities around the world have chosen to regulate that part of its...
Let me pick up on that, because one of the areas that the taxi industry has said is really unfair is that they're obliged to carry a pretty heavy insurance in order to deal with what if an accident happens, whereas Uber drivers don't have to. I think a lot of jurisdictions have heard that complaint, and they have said, probably makes sense if Uber drivers have to carry some insurance as well. What about that? Are you going to do that?
Of course. I think that there's very few of us that would not comply to certain things.
Like what?
Like insurance.
So you will buy insurance? Extra insurance to deal with sort of accidents under a professional...
Even on the proposed things, I already have all that insurance, because I also am important when I drive my car.
Yes, you are.
I drive aging parents in there, nieces, nephews.
But that's
and
different.
I'm in there.
That's different from the kind of sort of professional type insurance that you'd have to buy as a business, right?
Exactly. But you have to also compare apples with apples. So a taxi cab is going to be insured for about 10,060 minutes in a week, because it's insured for 24/7, 7 days a week with multiple drivers. My car is insured for me for about 1,240 minutes. So everything has to be taken into account in measurements.
Tom, let's talk taxes. This is an issue you raise in your book, and once again, we're going to do an excerpt here from your book. Sheldon, if you would, let's bring up this quote. After a Toronto councillor obtained an email stating that there is no tax charged on Uber rides, the company claimed that its drivers are expected to collect sales tax, even though the cashless transaction is part of the service's appeal. Whatever happens to the driver's portion of the fare, the company's cut is tax-free. If you take an Uber in Canada, your credit card payment will go to Uber BV, incorporated in the Netherlands for tax reasons. You want to explain all that to us?
Yeah, so this is a tactic that's become quite common, and Uber is one of many companies that's really built a whole model around this. So what happens is this. If I order an Uber ride, then my payment goes to Uber BV. Uber BV is a subsidiary of Uber that operates out of the Netherlands.
Why?
So Uber Canada, just to start with, makes no money. So all the people who are representing Uber here, they have no income, so they pay no taxes. Uber BV, you'd think, well, it's taking in a bunch of money, so it's going to pay taxes on that. But surprisingly, Uber BV licenses its own intellectual property from another Uber subsidiary called Uber International, which is based partly in the Netherlands and partly in Bermuda.
And the advantage of doing all that is?
They avoid paying taxes in the Netherlands because the Netherlands doesn't charge tax on intellectual property. So is it confusing? Yes. Is it meant to be confusing? Absolutely. But the end result is that Uber ends up paying basically no taxes on its operations that happen outside the US.
Here's the excerpt from the Supreme Court of Canada, Cunningham versus Alberta. The history of the Métis is one of struggle for recognition of their unique identity as the mixed-race descendants of Europeans and Indians. Caught between two larger identities and cultures, the Métis have struggled for more than 2 centuries for recognition of their own unique identity, culture, and governance. And now I get to ask a really politically incorrect question that you all probably know is coming. Okay, Kelly, you first.
Ladies first.
Do people ever look at you and say, you sure don't look Métis?
Oh my gosh, every day.
All the time?
Oh yeah, because I am not shy about sharing either, and people are not shy at all, equally so, to say, you're lying. You can't be telling the truth. There's no way you're Aboriginal.
What do they think you are?
Just Canadian, maybe. I've gotten a slew of things, including Spanish. Like, it goes across the board. But I think the really interesting point when it comes to that is that typically I've never received that type of comment from someone within the Indigenous community. When I say I'm Métis, I will never have a friend of mine who's First Nations or Inuit be like, I don't really believe you.
They accept it.
Absolutely. I feel like I kind of get those comments personally from other people who don't identify as Aboriginal and who are, probably trying to make light of the situation or, learn more about my background or where I'm from. But at the same time, I can't say that comment isn't hurtful.
Would you, okay, let's just go for this here. Would you acknowledge that you don't look like what most people typically think a Métis is supposed to look like?
Absolutely, because when you think of Métis in public media, it's rarely a topic of conversation. Media for Métis people, by Métis people, comes usually from the M&O. And it's kind of, we're just seeing this new resurgence of Aboriginal people being talked about in the popular media and programs like The Agenda that are talking about Aboriginal people and their accomplishments in a positive light. I think for me, it's only been since the Olympics that I've kind of seen things shift, but it's very new. So I don't really blame people either with the lack of education that they receive.
And I think there's a misunderstanding. Métis don't have a specific phenotype or a look. They are polities, they are peoples, they are communities. And similar to how there's not one look for the Quebecois, there are these people who share a common culture, identity, history.
No, I hear you, Jason, but there is a quote unquote look that people think of when they think of Indigenous Canadians. And you don't have that look.
And I think that, but many First Nations who may live on and off reserve don't have that look either. And I think that bias, we need to talk about it. We need to own it, because that is, so that less than Aboriginal or not quite Aboriginal that is not who these peoples or these polities are. And that's not who the courts are. This is not a race-based quantum, blood quantum analysis. That's what the Indian Act imposed upon people, but that's not what those communities are. And those communities are bound together not by blood quantum. They're bound together by history, culture, identity, and way of life. And that is how they accept themselves, and that's where it starts. And then others need to accept that.
But do you operate from the assumption that people are not intending to be racist? They don't know.
Exactly. I think that that's the process of reconciliation. We need to have more discussion about that so people understand what these communities are. Of, oh, well, is the goal of Métis to become First Nations? Absolutely not. These are unique, distinct communities that emerged along the waterways of the fur trade, and that they have their own story and also aspirations. The goal also isn't to establish Métis reserves in all sorts of locations. The desire is to actually sit down and negotiate, how do we find our proper place within Confederation?
Gary, have you ever had your Métis ancestry questioned?
Yes, yeah, actually all the time. So it doesn't matter if you're dark-skinned or light-skinned. You know, people always use some. You know, they come in with these preconceived notions. So, and I'll give you, opposite extremes. So I always continue to get a chuckle out of this. One time down here in Toronto, we used to go to this nice little mom and pop Italian restaurant. Beautiful, beautiful woman, elderly woman. And so one day I was paying with the credit card, and she looks at the credit card, and she looks at me, and she looks at this, and she's, why does an Indian have a Ukrainian name? First of all, my dad would be upset because it's not a Ukrainian name either. His parents were Polish immigrants, and my Métis ancestry comes from my mother's side, and we're not First Nations. So she got it wrong on both accounts, but it's those types of things. And then,
but again, did you take offense at that?
No, I just kind of laughed at it because, this sweet young woman certainly didn't mean any offense by it, but it shows you the stereotype, the views that some people have.
Exactly.
Then the other extreme is sometimes I would go up to, the northwestern part of the province where I live, pull into a First Nations gas bar or whatever to fill up, and then, have a young fellow mean, well, you just want to be Indian. And so you get it from that side too, because there's a perception that you're Métis while you're less than something, and you're trying to be an Indian. No, you're not trying to be First Nations. We are proud of who we are. We have a very rich, proud culture, history. We've contributed so much to the building of the provinces and communities throughout Canada. And that's the work that continues to be in front of the Métis Nation, is telling our story, telling our history. That's part of the, why we're misunderstood sometimes is Canadians really don't know how Métis contributed so much to the building of the communities, provinces, and countries.
The Leap Manifesto is a nonpartisan initiative that is attempting to influence the entire political discourse. The party ultimately that the Leap Manifesto aims to influence is the one that's in power, because the urgency of these crises is such that we need these policy demands to be translated into laws and be passed yesterday. Now, the NDP, as a social democratic party, with a long-standing concern for inequality, with some of the best climate policies of any of the major federal parties, that have lots of different members. I'm skirting the issue of the Green Party for the moment. Obviously, felt some resonance with the document. But Alberta politics is a blood sport. It's an oil-soaked culture. And I have spent a lot of time in Alberta over the last 15 or 20 years, have a lot of friends there, and I understand that the Alberta government under Rachel Notley feels that doubling down on pipelines is political survival for them. And they've done some decent things.
Well, but that sounds like you doubt her socialist bona fides by saying that.
No, I was just going to say that. In fact, last week's Alberta budget dealt with a $10 billion hole in their deficit without imposing austerity. I mean, I think that's absolutely historic. The fact that Alberta has a climate plan from a year ago is a leap for Alberta, but it's for Alberta. There's a lot of criticism, legitimate criticism of Alberta's climate plan. It allows for emissions to grow in the province with the highest emissions and the fastest growing emissions. So I don't quite see the math that they're asserting, especially if they're calling for new pipelines, which implies new growth in production of bitumen and export. How are we going to get our emissions down in any way like what we just promised in Paris? I just don't see the math, and they haven't made the case on the basis of the math.
Maybe the answer to that is we can't. Maybe the answer to that is we are with you in spirit, but we can't do it all today. Let's delay it a bit. There are too many people out of work. Government revenues are falling too quickly. We can't afford the health and social services that we want. Avi, cut us a break.
Terrific, terrific response. And that's precisely why we should be doubling down on renewable jobs, because the research is stellar that they create 6 to 8 times more jobs per dollar of investment than fossil fuel investments. Pipelines are the least job creating. The economic argument for pipelines is just utterly beyond me. It's years before shovels go in the ground. The whole point of a pipeline is to move materials without the need for labor, right? So this can't be. I don't see the economic argument. And Greenpeace Alberta just put out a report saying that they could get 140,000 climate jobs if they really focused all of that public spending and more on creating renewables and retrofits and conservation, which is the low-hanging fruit, as we know, creates tons and tons of jobs. And so many of the 70,000 and more than 70,000 oil workers who have been abandoned in the last year by the richest and most powerful industry in history could be put back to work with the same skills that they have if the renewable economy was the singular focus of that government. They've chosen a different route. I respect the difference, but for a lot of us, we don't see the benefit.
You've been asked a lot of questions in your time, and this may take the cake on being the oddest.
Okay.
So with that set up,
awesome. I'm so ready.
Humor me for a second.
Okay.
Would it have been better for our world if the Industrial Revolution had never happened?
Well, the easy way out of this is to say hypotheticals. I mean, I don't know what would have replaced it. I think the Industrial Revolution was a turning point, and we argue this in the film, and Naomi does in the book, in terms of our relationship with nature. That it was longstanding in Judeo-Christian society that humans considered themselves the masters of nature. But with the unleashing of fossil fuels on an industrial scale, all of a sudden we were able to make that a reality. It used to be that they had to put factories near rushing water so that there was some connection to the need for a natural engine for steam-powered factories. All of a sudden you could put factories where there was the cheapest labor. All of a sudden you could sail ships regardless of the wind. And so what the Industrial Revolution and the fossil fuel revolution did was really set us apart from nature, except we're not. And the climate crisis is telling us now that we have to start responding again to our relationship with the natural world. The planet is screaming at us. Would it have been better if the Industrial Revolution never happened? Like, as a person with a telephone in their pocket? No one's going to say that. No one, the portrayal of people who are on the green left as Luddites is a willful political smear. We're all part of the society. We've all been shaped by it. We all enjoy its many, many benefits. And we can also see its limitations and want to get to something better. I'm not a romantic, despite what Margaret Wente says, that I want everyone in the world to eat moldy potatoes, if indeed she wrote that sentence. We are not romantics about an agrarian society before the wheel was invented.
I gotcha. Okay. You referenced your grandfather and your father a little earlier, and I am curious about the kind of socialism that your grandfather believed in, the kind of socialism that your father believed in, and yours. Is it the same thing?
Did I bring socialism on the set tonight? It's actually, unlike Bob Ray, who I remember in the 1990s was famous for not being able to say the S word, I wouldn't be shy about saying it. I don't know what socialism describes today. And this is an argument I have with my family all the time.
Bernie Sanders, I guess.
Well, Bernie's, God bless him, and he's been saying the same thing for 40 years, and so he gets to keep saying it. I feel like there's a new politics emerging, where indigenous worldview is connecting with deep green environmental concern, which is connecting with a tradition of social justice, of anger at inequality, of a desire to do something much more dramatic.
What do you want to call that, Avi?
I don't have an...
Everybody,
Steve,
if everybody wants to
if I had a label,
right?
I'd be wearing it on my T-shirt instead of the Leap Manifesto. Maybe it's Leapism.
Now, because I've read this, I know what your bad days are like. And I'm telling you, anybody watching this right now wouldn't have a clue, right? That you were the slightest bit ill, right? I mean, you seem perfectly happy, perfectly gorgeous, perfectly everything. Yeah. So you're having a good day, I guess.
I'm having a good day.
Do you know why you're having a good day today?
Not entirely, no.
You just are.
Yeah, I try to manage my time. I try to give myself enough rest. That makes a huge difference. I don't operate at a deficit very well anymore. So I took a sleeping pill last night to make sure that I would get enough rest to be able to be perky today. So that's I've learned that there are things I can do that make a difference.
What has writing this book done for you?
It's done a number of things. On a practical level, it's given me something to focus on and to focus what I'm thinking and feeling on and to process this very different way of living I've had to really rapidly acclimate to. It's got me back into drawing on a regular basis. I was an artist who wasn't drawing regularly before. And it's helped me tap into a tremendously caring community. In my local circle of friends and family, yes, we have some people with cancer. I have a family history, but I didn't have a community of people who straight up understand what I'm going through. And doing these drawings and writing these kinds of feelings and experiences and sharing them has given me access to people both in Canada and around the world who have shared experience.
Let's share a little more of that. Here's a quote from the book, and then we'll show some of your artwork as well. Here's Tava Harrison in the book In Between Days. Rather than focus on what cancer takes away, I try to focus on what it doesn't. Because as much as I've lost, my life is really rich and full. I have a remarkable love, truly everybody remarks on it, a space to write and draw when I have energy, a warm and intelligent family, inspiring friends. There is so much beauty in the world. And Sheldon, if you would, let's put up the image then. This is just one of many, many pictures which you have drawn, which are in the book. How do you still see so much beauty in the world given what you're going through right now?
I think I can answer that in two ways. One, I'm still myself, and I am a person who sees beauty in the world, right? That I think in a way, being sick and knowing that I have a terminal illness has amplified that, because it's something I don't want to give up, right? So I'm it's almost brighter and sharper, and it's bittersweet, but it's precious. I find that as I know that I may not have as much of it as I hoped for, I'm hungrier, I'm more voracious for devouring art and culture and life, and it feels really precious.
Tava, I normally wouldn't ask such a personal question, but you talk about this in the book, and so we're going to go here. You are married to a wonderful guy named David, whom I know, and who is a sweetheart. And again, since you talk about it, let's ask this. Do you still have a sex life?
I do. I
With
do.
him?
But I have to work at it. It's not effortless. I actually appreciate that you're going there, because the reason I included the sections of the book that talk about vaginismus and sexual dysfunction are because I feel like we don't talk about it enough. And whether or not you have the cause that I do with the oophorectomy, many people who are in treatment for cancer have premature menopause, whether it's permanent or not. And there are ways to manage the sexual dysfunction you experience with cancer, but they're not really volunteered to you unless you go seeking information, asking, how can I work around this? I've had a lot of people, in my healthcare team say, oh, it's a nice sign that you're even still interested in a sex life.
It is encouraging.
Right.
Yeah. And he feels the same way. I mean, he doesn't love you any less because of all this. He's not any less attracted to you, I presume.
No.
But there's an effort that's involved with you two that presumably is not involved with other people who are not going through what you're going through right now.
No, with vaginismus, there's a diminished elasticity, and there's a tightening in the pelvic floor, both of which make penetration really difficult. So you have to use tools. You need aids like dilators and lubricants and I'm losing words.
But what about sex drive? Do you even have? I mean, do you have sex drive anymore?
I do. It's diminished, but it's still there. It's not gone.
Good. How were you eventually liberated?
I was liberated in Ebensee.
Which is in Austria?
Which is in Austria. It was a bad month because this was the end. And the Reich was finished, and there was no more work. They shut the camp. They threw away the key. They didn't give us our rations. Typhus broke out and was killing people by the thousand. There were mountains of bodies piled up. Millions of flies flying all over the place. It was hot. The bodies were decomposing. And finally, it hit me. I got typhus. Typhus was a terrible thing. Lice were burrowed under our skin, and they carried the bacteria from body to body. And there were no doctors or medicine. And I started with sleeping on the top bunk when I arrived in Ebensee, and finally I was in the lower bunk because I didn't have the strength to climb up. And people were just keeling over right in the floor of the hut, of the barrack. And it was, I found out after, it was May the 6th. I'm in the lower bunk. I woke up, somebody is mumbling away. He shuffles in his wooden clogs on the cement floor and is mumbling that the guards are no longer in the tower. And no longer in the tower, and I keep hearing, I says, I must be having a fever dream. You see, my system was shutting down. This is the end, when you don't want food, and I thought, I need to find this out. And with my last ounce of strength, I knew that if I don't get out of this terrible place, I'll never get out of here. I had to crawl over cadavers, and I was out in front of the barrack. And I could see that the tower was empty. I mean, that was a miracle. I mean, there's no SS guard. They were there 24/7, sitting beside a machine gun and a searchlight. And seconds later, the gate is flying in, and the tank is coming through. It had a white star on it, and I said, wow, this is better than the cross of the tank units. And there were black soldiers sitting on the turret.
These are American soldiers?
American soldiers. And I'll never forget that sight. This tank is coming through, and it stops. And the soldiers were on top of the turret. Can you imagine what they were looking at? This was a unit that came through the Battle of the Bulge. A crack unit that worked under General Patton's Third Army. And I know this from Sergeant Johnny Stevens, whom I met many years later in Toronto. But I looked at their eyes. Their eyes were like saucers. They were in shock what they were looking at. They never saw a sight like this. And the smell, we couldn't smell the decomposing bodies. I mean, we lived with it. And they were in total shock. So I knew that this was a wonderful thing. And you are liberated, but first thing was, am I free? What am I going to do now? I can't get off the ground. So it was sort of touch and go. The irony of it was that we were dying from starvation, many more. I mean, I had some better rations after I was in the operating room, but many others didn't. We were dying from starvation. Now, when the Americans brought up an army kitchen and they started to cook up a meal, stew, and they fed it to people, I said, I will never stay in a lineup again for as long as I live. I wasn't going to go there to the kitchen. First, I couldn't get off the ground, and the smell of the food was actually making me sick. You don't want food anymore. And everybody was naked, and they had a pot of stew, and they ate it. You could see them. They were like a little pregnant, and 2 minutes later, they simply dropped dead. Their stomachs ruptured, and it killed them. So it was a big dilemma for them. They didn't know how to deal with these thousands of people. And we had to be fed with an eyedropper, but who had that kind of infrastructure to bring us back to a normal health? It wasn't possible. So it was a long haul, and It took me 3 years to become mentally and physically healthy.
And that is the Agenda's Week in Review. You can see all of those programs in their entirety. They're on our website at tvo.org, on our iTunes channel, and on the YouTube channel at youtube.com/theagenda.
Help TVO create a better world through the power of learning. Visit supporttvo.org and make a tax-deductible donation today.